Hello friends, and welcome to this Growing for Life video. In today's video I want to look into a subject which is absolutely vital to understand, because it's something which we actually rely on to sustain life. It's something that actually provides about 95% of our food. It's something which takes hundreds of years to develop, and it's something which actually is the second largest storage of carbon on our planet. It is of course soil. Whether you call it soil, dirt, loam, earth, and we'll look at those terms later, it's absolutely vital. And in this video I want you to understand how to look after the soil, how we can manage the soil, how we can keep it fertile, how we can keep it healthy, and how soil works. How do things grow? And of course, I think to be able to do that, we need to go back to the start and look at what is soil. What are the processes which make soil happen? And to do that, we need to have a little lesson in geology. So let's go and do that now. So here we have the essential building blocks for soil. Now soil starts off as rocks, obviously much larger rocks than these, but as an example, big rocks, and then over time through a process of weathering and organic intervention through lichens and other processes, the rocks break down into smaller rocks and they move about, and then of course they break down into smaller rocks, into what we might call gravel, which then breaks down into fine dust and sand, and essentially it breaks down into three components, and that is sand, silt and clay. Now we have a little bit of clay here, which is found on our property, but predominantly the soil on our property is very rich in sand, and it's often called a sandy loam. Within that we then add organics, so leaves, grass, other organic material that breaks down over time, of course microorganisms, small insects, worms get into the soil, and then they add the nutrition. The minerals come from the rocks and the nutrition comes from the organics. And all those things combined with water and of course air make our soil. And that process takes hundreds of years. In fact, it takes about 2,000 years to make 10 centimetres of topsoil. And of course that's a very valuable thing to us. We can't afford to lose that, which is happening at the moment as a lot of soil is left bare on fields and it's washed away or it's blown away. So these are the components of soil, and now we need to look at how soil works. How does it do its job? So let's go and look at that. So we know what soil is made up of, but we need to understand how it works. How do things grow? And we need to do that, we need to look at soil fertility, and more importantly, and often overlooked, is the soil biology. How healthy is our soil? Soil fertility is, I guess in one sense, quite simple, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but it is essentially the nutrients that the vegetables need to be able to grow, and we often think of nitrogen for that. So we look at adding some nitrogen-based composts, manures, fertilizers, things like that, and that we think we'll just spread that around and that will sort of solve the problem. And to a degree it does. If your soil is low in fertility, then it will need some nitrogen-based fertilizers, and of course there's other minerals as well. But I think what I want to focus in this video is really the sort of the biology and how that works. Our soil at the moment will look through the video quite brown, I suppose, and because we've had a lot of rain overnight. If you'd seen it a couple of days ago, it was a very different story. So we're in the process of making a market garden here with these long, thin beds, and I'll cover that in a different video. But in order to do that, we need to make the beds and dig them out, and then over time you'll cover them up with compost. And the reason we're doing that is because this soil, this loam, actually is almost void of organic matter. It's been ploughed over many years, the soil has been broken up and turned over, and that's caused, there's been no organic material being added to it, and that's caused many problems which we need to fix. We've got to start somewhere, and this is where we are. The reason that's really a problem is because when we think about soil health, we think about the organisms that are in the soil and the job they do. That's often referred to as the soil food web. So if you think of the microbiology, the very tiny organisms, the bacteria in there, and the fungi, they start working together and they build a soil web. So one feeds another, feeds another, feeds another. As we get up to, right from the bacteria up to worms, and in between we've got things called nematodes, and then we've got other little critters which feed each other, and that all causes a process to happen in the soil, and which is good for the soil. That's the soil health. On top of that, we talked about the fungi. There's mycorrhizal processes going on in the soil, and there's a web that happens there, and of course when that soil is broken up through tilling or digging and forking over, all that's broken up, and that often happens towards the top of the soil, and there's a symbiotic relationship going on with all those things in the soil, which it's almost like a bartering, I suppose, between the plants. They provide sugars into the soil which the mycorrhizal fungi feed on, and then in exchange the mycorrhizal fungi and other organisms bring the nutrients to the plants which they need, and that helps those plants grow and helps those plants become healthy plants, strong plants which can resist disease, and there's no need then for other things like pesticides and herbicides. Now that subject is incredibly more complicated, and I don't want to go into it too deeply on this video, but I will provide some links to videos if you want to look into it deeper. But when you start to think about all those things that are going on in the soil that perhaps you haven't considered, you can understand its importance. So how do we help that process? That's something we need to look at. Now, I talked about this is the beginning of these beds. Down at the other end of the garden, and we've got some beds which have been completed, and I'll take you down there and I can show you what we've done there and the impact that's having and will have in the years to come. So let's go and look at that. So here we are down at the bottom of the garden, and here we have a bed which was originally made up just like the ones we saw at the top. In fact, it's actually a bed of peas which are just starting to sprout out. Hopefully you can see that. The main difference though with this is that we've covered it with a thick layer of compost over the top. Now, it was dug over last year, and like I say, this field has been ploughed for many years, and we've now put a stop to that and changed to this system. The compost is on the top. We've not dug it in, we've not amended the soil in any way apart from we've put on some fertiliser with what's called a compost tea. By putting the compost on the top, we do two things. We put a physical barrier across the top of the soil, so the wind and the rain and the elements, we get a lot of snow here, they're protected, the soil is protected from those elements. And then secondly, what happens is, because we don't then disturb the soil, and all the disturbance is very minimal, we certainly don't go down very deep, we allow the life of that soil, the healthiness, to come back. So all those microorganisms, the bacteria, the mycorrhizal fungi, things like that, they will slowly come back into the soil, and then they will attract bigger organisms, insects and worms, and through a process of precipitation, the water, the rain, and biological activity, the goodness from the compost and the organic matter from the compost will be drawn down through the soil, and that will then attract more worms, and so on and so on. And then those worms make burrows, they allow air and water into the soil, and that process starts. It takes a few years, but it will happen. Of course, the other thing that the physical barrier of the compost does is it keeps moisture in the soil. Like I said earlier, we've got a very sandy loam here, and that allows water to drain through very quickly, but also to be lost through evaporation and through wind. And that layer of compost protects that. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have big beds like this. This is about the principles of what's happening here, and a principle that you can employ very easily. And actually is a lot less work, because you don't need to do that hard digging over, the sort of double forking that you've known for years to do, that you don't need to do that. So it's a win-win really, great for the soil, great for us, and it makes for healthier, more nutritious vegetables. And I guess that is our journey into soil. It's a quick journey, and there's loads more to explore. There's some fascinating videos out there, which I'll link to at the bottom in the description. I really implore you to sort of think about this and think about these processes, and to employ them in your gardening journey. If you like this video, then please give us a thumbs up. Please share it, and encourage others. And again, thank you for watching, and please subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.